Sometimes love is like madness, and for the mad, it becomes either healing or poison. The air in Malfoy Manor was thick with the scent of smoke and rain when Bellatrix Lestrange knelt before her master. Her black curls fell over her shoulders like a shadow come alive, her breath quick and shallow, her wand trembling in her hand. She wasn't afraid. No, fear had long since abandoned her. But something else pressed against her ribs tonight, something that felt far too much like longing. The Dark Lord stood before the fire, his pale hands clasped behind his back, the flicker of the flames dancing against his face. The light made him almost human, and that was what terrified her most. For when he looked like this, when the fire softened the cruel lines of his features, she could almost imagine that the thing she felt might be love. "Rise," he said, his voice low, silken, carrying power like a blade hidden beneath velvet. She obeyed instantly, the movement smooth, reverent. His red eyes lifted to meet hers, and Bellatrix felt her pulse stutter. Every time he looked at her, it was as though he could see right through the skin, through bone and memory, straight into the blackened heart that beat for him alone. "You have done well, Bellatrix," he murmured. "The Auras will think twice before crossing my followers again." She tried to breathe, to answer, but the praise, so rare, so precious, burned hotter than the Cruciatus curse. "I live to serve you, my lord," she whispered. He turned then, the hem of his robe brushing the floor, and walked toward her. Bellatrix stood frozen, her body rigid with the effort of control. When he stopped close enough that she could feel the cold aura of his presence, her breath caught. His hand lifted almost lazily, and for a fleeting instant she thought, she prayed, that he might touch her. Instead, he brushed a gloved finger beneath her chin, forcing her to lift her face. "Do you?" he asked softly. "Do you live for me, Bellatrix?" The words struck something deep within her. Her voice faltered, but her conviction did not. "Yes, always." A faint smile touched his lips. It wasn't warmth, he was incapable of that, but it was something dangerously close to curiosity. He released her then, stepping back. "Good, then I have a task for you." And just like that, the spell was broken. Bellatrix's knees trembled with the effort not to collapse. She longed for the brush of his hand again, even if it was only to command her pain. She needed his attention like air. "There is an artifact," he continued, "an ancient relic hidden within the ruins of a manor once belonging to the Peverils. The item is cursed, deadly to any who are not truly loyal. You will retrieve it for me." Bellatrix's eyes shone with wild delight. "I will not fail you." "No," he said softly. "You will not, because failure, Bellatrix, would mean death." Her heart beat faster, but it wasn't fear. It was the thrill of being chosen. Death was nothing compared to the privilege of being seen by him. That night, as she prepared for the mission, the memory of his touch haunted her. She had seen him kill without hesitation, had watched him destroy men for the smallest mistakes. But he had spared her, even when her eagerness had bordered on madness. Sometimes she wondered if he understood what power he truly had over her. Other times, she feared he did. When dawn broke, she apparated to the ruins. The wind tore at her robes as she stepped into the remnants of a forgotten hall. The floor was broken, the air thick with dust and whispers. Her wand light shimmered off the stone walls, revealing ancient sigils carved deep into the surface. She could feel the curse thrumming, alive, almost sentient. "Loyalty," she whispered, tracing the marks with her wand. "Only loyalty shall open the way." She thought of him, the cold fire in his eyes, the sound of his voice, the way he said her name like a spell, and she knew she would pass any test for him. She would burn herself to ash if it meant earning his approval. The curse flared as she touched the sigil, pain searing up her arm like molten metal. She did not cry out. She only whispered his name over and over as the world blurred around her. When the agony faded, something heavy fell into her hands, a small silver locket glowing faintly with magic. The relic. She clutched it to her chest, trembling. But the victory was short-lived. The air behind her shifted, a trap triggered by the curse's breaking. A wave of dark energy surged toward her. Bellatrix tried to shield, but the blast hit her squarely in the chest. Her body crashed against the wall, blood filling her mouth. The world dimmed. For a moment, she thought she would die there, alone in the ruins, with his name on her lips. But then, a sound, a whisper that was not the wind. "Foolish girl," a voice hissed, and cold fingers brushed her cheek. Her eyes fluttered open, and she saw him, the Dark Lord. He was kneeling beside her, his expression unreadable. Magic pulsed around them, fierce and silent. "You disobeyed my order to wait for reinforcements," he said, his tone sharp but quiet. "And yet, you succeeded." Bellatrix tried to speak, but blood spilled from her lips instead. He waved a hand, and the pain vanished, the wound sealing in a shimmer of magic. "Why?" he demanded softly. "Why risk your life without command?" Her answer came in a whisper. "Because you would have done the same." For the briefest heartbeat, his gaze softened. Something flickered behind those crimson eyes, something like recognition. Then it was gone. "Loyalty," he murmured, almost to himself. "Or something else." He rose to his feet, and Bellatrix felt his power surround her like a storm. She realized then that she would never escape him, not in this life or the next. Her heart, blackened as it was, had chosen him long ago. And as he turned away, she smiled through the ache, whispering, "Always." The night after the mission was one Bellatrix would never forget. The manor was silent, yet she could not rest. The relic, gleaming, cursed, heavy with dark promise, lay upon the table in the drawing room. It pulsed faintly, like a second heartbeat, one she imagined matched her own when he entered the room. And then he did. The air itself changed when Lord Voldemort appeared. Shadows bowed before him. Bellatrix stood instantly, trembling not from fear, but from the unbearable awareness that she had once again been granted his attention. His gaze swept over her like frost, slow, deliberate. "You disobeyed me," he said. Each syllable fell with precision, cold and controlled. "Yes, my lord," she whispered. "And yet, I returned." He moved closer. The firelight caught the curve of his pale face, the slits of his eyes reflecting red like coals buried under ash. "You risked my plans," he continued, "but you also brought me what no other could." She tried to meet his gaze, but found herself staring instead at his hands, so still, so lethal. "I knew," she said quietly, "that no one else would be worthy to touch what was meant for you." Something shifted in his expression, so slight most would have missed it. Curiosity, or perhaps the faintest trace of something that might have been amusement. "You speak as though you understand what it means to be mine," he said. Bellatrix's breath caught. word mine was a spark in dry tinder. Her body felt weightless, her pulse frantic. She knew better than to hope, but she could not help it. I understand, she whispered, that to serve you is to live for you. A slow silence followed. Then, unexpectedly, he reached toward the relic. The locket trembled, reacting to his touch, and a wisp of silver mist coiled into the air like smoke. Bellatrix watched him, entranced. Even in moments of stillness, he emanated power. He was beautiful in a way no one else could ever comprehend, terrible and magnificent all at once. "You would die for me," he said simply. "Yes." "You would kill for me." She smiled. "I already have." He regarded her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said, almost absently, "And yet you do not understand what I am." He turned away, and the air grew colder. "I am not the man you see before you. I am beyond such things. Love, desire, pain, these are illusions of the weak. I have cut them from myself." The words should have wounded her, yet they did not. Instead, they ignited something fierce and consuming. Because if he could not feel, then perhaps she could feel enough for both of them. She took a step closer, her voice trembling but sure. "Then let me be your weakness, my lord. Let me hold what you've cast aside. I ask for nothing but the right to bear your will." He turned sharply. For a moment, anger flared in his eyes, an anger that made the room seem to shrink, the temperature plummet. But beneath it, there was something else. Confusion, interest, perhaps even recognition of the danger she posed to his perfect detachment. "You presume much, Bellatrix." "I live to serve," she said again, almost desperate. "But I cannot—" Her voice broke. "I cannot stop what I feel." Silence. Her confession hung between them like a living thing. Voldemort stepped forward, so close that his breath stirred a strand of her hair. "And what is it that you feel?" he asked, voice barely a whisper. Her throat tightened. The truth burned in her mouth, dangerous and wild. "Devotion," she breathed. "Beyond magic, beyond fear. I belong to you." The words could have been her death sentence. Instead, he merely studied her face, as if searching for the weakness he expected. He found none. Finally, he said, "Devotion is useful, if it remains controlled." Bellatrix forced herself to nod, though her chest ached with the weight of unspoken longing. "Then teach me control," she murmured. Something flickered in his gaze again, gone almost as soon as it appeared. He raised a hand and, without warning, placed 2 fingers under her chin. Her breath hitched. The touch was light, cold, inhuman, but to her it was everything. "You mistake my mercy for favor," he said. "Do not." But he did not withdraw his hand. His eyes searched hers, red meeting black, and for one terrible instant she saw herself reflected in him. Not a servant, but a mirror. The realization terrified her. "I will not fail you again," she whispered. "Whatever you ask, whatever you need, I will give." Voldemort released her abruptly, as if burned. "You will rest. There is more to be done." He swept from the room, his robes whispering across the floor, and Bellatrix stood motionless long after he vanished. The imprint of his touch lingered against her skin, a phantom brand that burned with forbidden satisfaction. When she finally sank to her knees, the locket still gleaming between her hands, her heart beat in rhythm with its pulse. Every breath she took seemed to whisper his name. Days passed, and he did not summon her. She attended meetings, carried out orders, but his absence gnawed at her. She watched others, Lucius, Dolohov, even her husband, Rodolphus, receive commands, but not her. She waited, obediently, madly, until one evening an owl came. The parchment bore no seal, only a single line written in dark ink. "Come to me." Her breath caught. She was moving before she realized it, disapparating into darkness. When she arrived at the appointed place, a desolate cliff overlooking the sea, the wind tore at her robes, carrying the tang of salt and rain. And there he stood, outlined against the sky like a figure carved from night itself. "You came," he said. "I always will." He regarded her, his face expressionless. "Tell me, Bellatrix, do you still believe in loyalty?" "With every breath." "Then prove it." He lifted the relic, the locket she had retrieved, and held it out to her. "It requires a sacrifice," he said, "a test of will. Do you accept?" She hesitated only long enough to whisper, "Yes." The moment her fingers closed around the silver, agony ripped through her body. Pain seared her veins, every nerve screaming. She heard her own breath hitch, but she did not scream. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. The locket blazed with light, and when it dimmed, Bellatrix was still standing, barely. Voldemort watched her in silence, and for the first time, his eyes held something like respect. "You endure," he said quietly. "That is rare." Her vision blurred, but she smiled through it. "I endure for you." A long pause followed. The wind howled. Then, in a voice barely audible above the storm, he said, "Perhaps you are exactly what I made you to be." She fell to her knees before him, shaking, the rain mingling with the sweat on her skin. "Then I have purpose," she whispered. And when his hand brushed her hair, fleeting as a shadow, she knew she would die 1,000 times to feel that touch again. Bellatrix did not remember how she returned to the manor that night, only that her body trembled with exhaustion and something far more dangerous, exhilaration. The mark of the locket burned faintly against her palm, a searing reminder of what she had done, of what he had allowed her to do. Voldemort had tested her and found her worthy. That thought sustained her for days. She could not eat, could not sleep. She moved through the manor like a shadow, her thoughts consumed by one image. His eyes as he'd watched her endure, crimson and unreadable, yet fixed upon her as if she were the only being alive. It was madness to crave such attention. She knew that, and yet she welcomed it. Madness, after all, was devotion without restraint. When he summoned her again, she felt the pull before the mark on her arm even burned. She apparated instantly, not to Malfoy Manor this time, but to a forgotten village in the north. The moonlight spilled across the cobblestones like liquid mercury. He was waiting in the square, the wind whipping through the tattered banners of a church that had long since fallen to ruin. "You are late," he said. She knelt immediately, head bowed. "Forgive me, my lord. Rise." His tone carried no warmth, but it did not need to. The mere fact that he had called for her was enough. He studied her face for a moment, then spoke. "Tell me, Bellatrix, do you believe the Dark Lord can be betrayed?" She blinked, unsure. "Never, my lord." "And yet it has happened. There are whispers among my followers, a traitor hiding among them, a coward who leaks our plans to Dumbledore's order." Rage flared through her, swift and bright. "Tell me who, my lord. I will find them. I will." He silenced her with a look. "You will not act without instruction." She lowered her gaze. "Yes, my lord." He stepped closer, his presence swallowing the space between them. You are loyal, Bellatrix. But loyalty is not the same as understanding. I must know whether you serve me because you believe or because you worship. Her breath caught. The question felt like a blade drawn slowly against her throat. I do both. That is not an answer. Her eyes flickered up just once. Then I will show you. He tilted his head slightly, considering. Then he handed her a folded parchment. On this list are names. Some may be innocent, some may not. You will visit them all. If they falter, if they hesitate, even for a moment, kill them. Bellatrix accepted the parchment with trembling fingers. She did not ask questions. She did not need to. The order itself was a gift. When she turned to leave, he spoke again, softly, almost idly. Do not mistake purpose for favor. You exist because you are useful. Remember that. She hesitated. Then, with the faintest smile, she whispered, Yes, my lord. But usefulness can be devotion too. His gaze lingered on her for a heartbeat too long, and she thought, perhaps imagined, that he almost sighed. The first name on the list was a man she had known in her youth, a half-blood healer who once treated members of the Sacred 28. He greeted her with confusion, with fear, and that was enough. His last word was a plea. Her last thought, as the curse left her wand, was that she was one step closer to her master's approval. Each name brought her closer to something she couldn't name, a kind of clarity, a kind of peace. But with each death, she wondered if he would see her differently now, not as a servant, but as the one who never hesitated. When she returned to him, blood still staining her sleeve, he regarded her silently. You have done what I asked. Yes, my lord. Do you know which one was the traitor? She froze. No, my lord. None of them, he said simply. Her breath hitched. Then, it was a test. Bellatrix swallowed. Did I pass? He moved toward her slowly. You performed each command without question. You acted without hesitation. But tell me, Bellatrix, did you enjoy it? She opened her mouth, but no sound came. His tone was neither accusing nor approving. He was studying her again, dissecting her loyalty as if it were a creature under glass. Pain means nothing to you, he continued. Fear means nothing, but enjoyment, that is human, and you are still, regrettably, human. Bellatrix's pulse thundered in her ears. She wanted to argue, to prove she was beyond weakness. But then he reached out, just barely, his hand hovering above her heart. You feel too much, he said quietly, and it will destroy you. Then let it, she whispered. If it serves you, let it. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he drew back his hand as though rejecting the idea itself. You do not understand, Bellatrix. Love is not loyalty. Love is a chain, and I cut mine long ago. But his voice faltered on the last word, so slightly she almost missed it. Almost. She met his eyes, those crimson depths that had seen everything, that feared nothing, and said, Chains bind, my lord, but they also hold things together. He turned from her then, as though her words were dangerous. You will return to the manor. You will rest. Yes, my lord. She bowed deeply, but as she rose, she dared to ask, Why did you choose me for this test? He paused, his back still to her. Because, he said slowly, I wished to see if you would obey even when I gave you nothing to gain. And did I? Another pause. Then, quietly, yes. When he disapparated, the air cracked with cold. Bellatrix stood alone in the empty square, the echo of his voice still circling her like smoke. She realized then that he had given her something after all. Not praise, not warmth, but acknowledgement. And that was more dangerous than any spell. That night, she dreamt of him. Not as the Dark Lord, but as the man he might have been, sharp-eyed, brilliant, untouchable. In the dream, he spoke her name softly, almost kindly. When she woke, her heart was pounding, her pillow damp with tears she would never admit to shedding. The following days blurred into one another. Missions, reports, silence. And yet, each time he entered a room, she felt it, the electric pull between them. He never touched her again, never even allowed her too near, but his eyes would find hers, and that was enough. He was power incarnate. She was his worship, and between them stretched the kind of devotion that burns entire worlds to ash. She knew it could never end well. But even as the war darkened, as whispers of the boy who lived began to stir, Bellatrix found herself thinking one forbidden thought. If love was weakness, then perhaps weakness was the only thing left that could destroy him. And she, the most loyal, the most lost, would be the one to test that truth. The summer nights grew longer, darker, and Bellatrix lived in the shadow of his absence. Every moment without his summons felt like suffocation, a slow drowning in her own fevered thoughts. She carried out her duties flawlessly, yet the silence that followed each mission was unbearable. The other Death Eaters feared her, rightly so, but they also whispered. She saw it in their eyes, that glint of unease when she entered a room, the hush that followed her laughter. They thought her mad. They were right. Madness, she decided, was not an illness. It was clarity. The Dark Lord had said she felt too much, that love was weakness. But what he didn't see, what he refused to see, was that her love for him had made her stronger than any of them. She would die for him. She would kill for him. She would burn the world to see him smile. And then, one evening, her mark burned. It happened suddenly, a searing pain that stole her breath. The call, at last. She apparated instantly, landing in the corridor of an old manor whose walls smelled of damp stone and blood. He was waiting for her in the drawing room. The fire cast long shadows across the floor, and his figure stood among them like a vision from another realm. He did not turn as she entered. He did not need to. He knew her presence by the sharp intake of her breath, by the way the air itself seemed to tremble. "My lord," she whispered, bowing low. "Rise, Bellatrix." She obeyed, heart hammering. "I have been watching," he said softly. "Your zeal is effective, but untempered fire consumes itself. I burn only for you." He turned then, eyes flashing in the firelight. "Do you think devotion excuses recklessness?" Her lips parted, but no words came. She wanted to tell him that she would rather burn at his feet than live untouched by his fire. But his gaze pinned her where she stood. "There are things in motion," he continued, "plans that require subtlety. I need followers who obey, not those who worship." His words struck like a curse. She flinched but refused to look away. "You have both," she said quietly. He stepped closer. "Do I?" The question cut deeper than any blade. Bellatrix's breath caught. His presence was overwhelming, cold and infinite, like standing at the edge of a void. She could feel the magic in him, coiled and alive, thrumming against her skin. "My lord," she said, her voice trembling, "you know my heart. I know your madness. And yet you still call me." she said, daring to meet his eyes. For a moment, neither moved. The silence between them was taut, vibrating with everything unsaid. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, he raised his hand. "Come here." She hesitated only long enough to steady her breathing before stepping forward. When she stood before him, he reached out, not to strike her, not to command her, but to touch her face. His fingers were cold as marble. "You would die for me," he murmured. "Yes. You would kill for me. Yes. But would you live for me, Bellatrix? Would you endure when every part of you begged for death?" Her voice faltered. "If that is your will." He regarded her for a long, unnerving moment. Then his hand fell away. "There may come a time when you must prove that." He turned and began to walk toward the door. But Bellatrix, reckless as ever, took a single step after him. "My lord," she said quickly, the words spilling before she could stop them. "Tell me one thing." He paused. Do you ever feel anything?" The question hung between them, fragile and perilous. He did not move. The fire crackled softly in the silence. Finally, he said, "Once." Her heart stopped. "When?" "When I was still human." He turned his head slightly, his gaze meeting hers. "But that was before I learned the truth. Emotion is a leash, and I do not wear leashes." Bellatrix's throat tightened. "Then let me be the leash," she whispered. "You will never fall so long as I hold you." His expression did not change, but his eyes darkened. "You speak of things you cannot comprehend. Then teach me." He turned fully now, the edge of his robe brushing against her hand as he passed. "You are already being taught. Every moment you remain alive is a lesson." She followed him with her gaze as he moved to the door. "Is this another test?" she asked softly. He paused again. "Everything is a test." And then he was gone. For days after that encounter, Bellatrix could think of nothing else. His words replayed endlessly in her mind. "Once, when I was still human." That single admission, quiet and fleeting, was worth more to her than all the praise in the world. It meant that somewhere, deep within the shell of the Dark Lord, there was a remnant of the man he had been, and she would find it. She would awaken it. It became her new purpose. She studied him in every meeting, the tilt of his head when he listened, the faint flicker of impatience in his eyes when others spoke too long. She noticed how his voice softened when he addressed her, though he likely never realized it. Even his anger toward her felt intimate, reserved. Rodolphus noticed, of course. Her husband, in name only, had long since stopped trying to reach her. One evening, as she prepared for another mission, he caught her arm. "Bella," he said quietly, this thing between you and him, it will destroy you." She smiled, serene and terrifying. "I would welcome destruction, so long as it's by his hand." Rodolphus looked at her then, really looked, and whatever remnants of love he once held for her turned to pity. He let her go without another word. Weeks passed before the next summons came. This time Voldemort met her in a deserted graveyard. The moon hung low and heavy, painting the tombstones in silver. "You've been faithful," he said when she appeared. "I have no other way to be." "I know." He moved closer. "Tonight you will witness something few have seen. It will not be pleasant." "I am not afraid." He inclined his head. "I know that too." Then he began the ritual. The air thickened with dark magic as ancient words spilled from his lips. Bellatrix stood at his side, watching, her pulse wild. Power gathered around him, twisting, crackling, seeping into the earth. She felt it crawl beneath her skin, and still she did not look away. When it was done, he was breathing hard, a rare sign of exertion. He turned to her, his eyes burning brighter than the moon. "You should not have watched," he said quietly. "I could not look away." Something like a shadow crossed his face. He reached out suddenly, his fingers brushing her throat, then resting briefly over her heart. "This," he murmured, "is why you will suffer more than any of them." "Then let me suffer," she whispered, "if it brings me closer to you." He withdrew his hand, his expression unreadable. "One day, Bellatrix, you will learn that love is not devotion. It is surrender, and I accept surrender from no one." But when he turned from her, his fingers lingered a fraction too long against hers, just enough to make her heart ache. She knew then that no curse, no war, no death could break the bond that had begun to grow between them. It was not love, not as the world knew it, but it was something far more dangerous, and she would chase it until it consumed them both. Bellatrix stood in front of the cracked mirror of her room at Malfoy Manor, the candlelight trembling across her reflection. The flame flickered with every breath she took, as if even the fire feared her. Her eyes were wild, bright with something that looked like triumph and ruin intertwined. It had been 2 weeks since the ritual, 2 weeks since he had touched her heart, briefly, coldly, and left her shaking as though she had glimpsed eternity. She had not seen him since. The mark on her arm had remained silent, her body untouched by the searing call of his magic. The silence was torture, but she welcomed it because longing was proof she still belonged to him. She tilted her head, examining her reflection. Her face was pale, lips bitten raw, but her eyes, they glowed with feverish life. Every sleepless night, every whisper of his voice in her mind only sharpened her devotion. The door creaked open behind her. "Bella!" Rodolphus's voice, soft but wary. She didn't turn. "You should knock." "I did," he said. "You didn't answer. I had no need to." He stepped inside, closing the door quietly. "You can't keep doing this. You barely eat. You... Do not presume to concern yourself with me." Her voice was calm, deadly. He hesitated. "He's using you." "Then let him," she snapped, spinning to face him. "I exist to be used by him, to serve his vision, to be his weapon, his will. That is the purpose I was born for." Rodolphus's expression crumbled. "You're my wife." A strange, bitter smile touched her lips. A title, nothing more. He stared at her, then shook his head slowly. "You've given him everything, Bella. What will be left of you when he's finished?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Nothing. And that's the point." For a moment, neither spoke. Then, quietly, Rodolphus said, "One day, he will destroy you." She turned back to the mirror. "Then I'll die in the only way that matters, in his name." He left without another word. That night, she dreamed again. She stood in a vast chamber of stone, the air humming with dark magic. The Dark Lord stood before her, his figure shifting in the shadows. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she had ever heard it. "You think you love me?" "I don't think," she said. "I know." He moved closer. "Love is chaos. You are drawn to it because you were born in its image. But chaos has no place beside me." She reached for him. "Then let me be at your feet." His hand came up, gentle and terrible, and rested on her cheek. "You do not understand what you ask for." "I understand perfectly." "Then prove it," he whispered. The words echoed like a spell. She woke with a start, gasping, the room spinning around her. The dream clung to her skin like smoke. She could still feel the ghost of his touch, and as if summoned by her thoughts, the mark on her arm burned. She apparated to the edge of a forest at dusk. The air was cold, the moon low and silver. Ahead of her, a faint light glowed between the trees. A clearing. He was waiting there, standing beside a stone altar carved with runes, so old they pulsed with forgotten power. She approached, bowing deeply. "My lord." "Bellatrix," he said. "You came quickly." "I always do." He regarded her for a long moment. "You dream of me." Her breath caught. "I do not deny it." His tone was mild, but the air trembled with power. "I do," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "You are everything." He stepped closer, and she could feel the heat of his presence, cold though he was. "And what do you dream?" "Of serving you," she said. "Of being worthy." He tilted his head slightly, studying her. "Worthy," he repeated. "And what if worthiness requires pain beyond what you have known? Then I will endure it. Even if it breaks you. If it breaks me, then you may remake me." Something passed over his face, something fleeting, unguarded. For the briefest moment, he looked almost human. "You mistake destruction for devotion," he said. She met his gaze without flinching. "And you mistake devotion for weakness." The words hung between them, dangerous, electric. No one spoke to him that way. No one dared. But instead of anger, he gave a quiet, almost imperceptible smile. "You test me, Bellatrix. I only mirror you, my lord." He moved suddenly, closing the distance between them in 2 long strides. His hand shot out, seizing her chin, forcing her to look up. The pressure was not cruel, but it left no question of who held power. "Do you understand what it means to stand before me as you do now?" he asked softly. "Yes," she whispered. "It means I am alive." He released her abruptly, as though burned. "Alive," he repeated, turning away. "You are reckless with that word." She dared to take a step forward. "And you are reckless with mine." The silence that followed was so sharp it could have shattered. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, low and quiet, the sound echoing against the stones like the hiss of a serpent. "You are unlike any of them," he said, "because I love you. Because you are unafraid." He looked at her again, and his voice dropped lower. "Fear keeps most loyal, but you—" He didn't finish. Instead, he turned toward the altar. On it lay a dagger, thin and silver, its hilt carved with a serpent coiled around a skull. "I called you here for a purpose," he said. "There is a ritual that requires a hand that does not tremble. You will assist me." She nodded, stepping forward without hesitation. "What must I do?" "You will open the vessel." She saw it then. A small vial on the altar, filled with something dark and viscous. It pulsed faintly, like living shadow. He handed her the dagger. "Do not spill a drop." Bellatrix's fingers wrapped around the blade. The metal hummed beneath her touch, the magic thrumming with hunger. As she sliced the vial open, the air filled with whispers. The shadows coiled and danced, rising like smoke before the Dark Lord's outstretched hand. For a moment, Bellatrix could feel the power surge between them, a force so immense it nearly drove her to her knees. But she held steady. He glanced at her once, and the faintest flicker of approval crossed his face. "You do not falter," he said. "I cannot," she whispered. "You are watching." The ritual ended as abruptly as it had begun. The air settled, heavy and still. Voldemort turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Go," he said quietly. "Rest." She hesitated. "Will I see you again?" His gaze flicked to her, sharp as a curse. "You will always see me, whether you wish to or not." And then he was gone. That night, Bellatrix sat by the fire, the dagger still in her hand. She turned it over slowly, her reflection glimmering on the blade. Her pulse had not yet slowed. Every moment she spent with him left a mark. Every word, every glance, every silence between them carved something deeper into her soul. She knew she was walking the edge of ruin. But the truth was, she no longer cared. He had said she was unafraid. He was wrong. She was terrified of what he made her feel, of how completely she belonged to him, of how one day, when he no longer needed her, she would crumble into dust. But until that day came, she would keep walking toward him, even if it meant walking into the fire. Because to Bellatrix Lestrange, love and destruction were the same thing, and she had already chosen her end. Bellatrix could not recall when night had ended and morning began. The days blurred, bled into one another. Endless hours of waiting, watching, wanting. The world was chaos, the war creeping closer to its climax, and yet her thoughts never strayed from him. Every rumor of his wrath made her pulse quicken. Every whisper of his name drew her nearer to madness. Tonight, the manor was alive with the noise of revelry. The Death Eaters had returned from a successful ambush, their laughter harsh and hollow in the grand hall. But Bellatrix stood apart, leaning against the marble pillar, her wine untouched. The laughter disgusted her. It was unworthy of him. They celebrated victory as though it belonged to them. Fools. All triumph was his. The doors swung open. Silence fell like a spell. Voldemort entered without a sound. The room bowed as one. Bellatrix's breath caught. He moved with the same terrible grace she remembered. Calm, deliberate, every gesture exact. The moment his crimson eyes swept across the crowd, her heart leapt, but he did not look at her. "Rise," he said softly. "You have done well." The crowd straightened, a ripple of awe moving through them. But Bellatrix saw only the way the light of the chandeliers glinted off his pale skin, the faint curl of his fingers around his wand. He was beauty made of cruelty, a vision too bright for mortal eyes. Then he spoke again. "There is one among you who failed." The air thickened. No one moved. "Rabastan," Voldemort said quietly. The younger Lestrange brother stepped forward, trembling. "My lord!" Silence. A breath, a pause, and then the spell. The green flash was so swift it barely lit the room. Rabastan crumpled without a sound. Bellatrix didn't flinch. She watched the body fall, her gaze fixed not on death, but on the man who had dealt it. Every act of his cruelty was a kind of devotion, every execution a form of purity. She loved him for it. She loved him because he did not love at all. When the meeting ended, the others dispersed like shadows. Bellatrix lingered, pretending to study the map on the wall, waiting until the last echo of footsteps vanished. "Stay," his voice commanded. Her breath shivered in her chest. She turned slowly, her heart hammering. He was standing by the fire, its light spilling across his face. The air between them crackled, silent but alive. "You disapprove," he said. "Never," she whispered. "You think I killed him needlessly. I think you were merciful." That drew a faint, dangerous smile from him. "Mercy, Bellatrix. For him. For me, never." He stepped closer. "You say that as though you wish for my cruelty." Her lips curved. "I do." He studied her for a long moment, the faint amusement fading into something harder to name. Why? Because it means you see me. He was silent. Then, in one swift movement, he reached for her wrist, his fingers wrapping around it with cold precision. She gasped, not in fear, but from the shock of contact. His grip was firm, unyielding, his skin icy against her own. "Do you think you could bear what it means to be seen by me?" he asked quietly. "I already do." "Foolish girl," he murmured. "You don't know what that means." She tilted her head, her eyes fever-bright. "Then show me." The challenge trembled in the air between them. For a moment, he didn't move. Then he released her, stepping back. "Perhaps I already have," he said, voice unreadable. "Perhaps that is why you are what you are." "What am I?" He regarded her. "Mine." The word burned through her like fire. Before she could speak, he turned away, his cloak swirling around him. "Leave me." But she couldn't. Not yet. "My lord," she said softly, "tell me what you want from me." He stopped, but did not turn. "I want silence." Her voice trembled. "And if I cannot give it, then you will suffer." She smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "Then I am already yours." He said nothing. And yet, as she turned to go, she felt it, the pull, invisible and sharp as a curse, holding her there between defiance and surrender. The following night, she returned to him unbidden. The world outside was drenched in rain, thunder rolling like distant drums. The manor's halls were empty, the war had swallowed the rest. She walked through the corridors barefoot, the hem of her black robes whispering against the floor. He was in the study, seated at a long table covered in maps and letters. He didn't look up when she entered. "You disobey me again. I couldn't stay away. I didn't call for you. Does it matter?" Now he looked at her. Everything matters. She approached slowly, her voice lowering. "Then tell me why you let me live. Others fail once and die. I disobey. I speak when you forbid it, and still you keep me near." He watched her, unmoving. "Because you are useful." "No." She took another step closer. "It's more than that." "Careful," he warned, his tone softening to ice. "You could have killed me 100 times." Her words spilled like a confession. "But you didn't. You won't. You see me, even when you say you don't." He rose from his chair slowly, his movements fluid and deliberate. "You mistake indulgence for intimacy." "Then make it truth," she breathed. "Make it mean something." His expression hardened. "You would destroy yourself to prove love to a man incapable of it." "Then let me be your proof," she said. Something flickered in his eyes. Rage, maybe, or pity, or something she couldn't name. He moved toward her in a blur, one hand rising, and she thought for a heartbeat that he might strike her. But instead, he stopped with his palm hovering just above her chest, the faint shimmer of his magic making the air vibrate. "Your heart," he murmured. "It beats too loud." "For you," she whispered. He stared at her, the muscles in his jaw tightening. Then, quietly, "You would give it to me if I asked, wouldn't you?" Without hesitation. A silence followed. Then, almost reluctantly, he said, "And yet, I do not ask." "Why?" "Because I might take it." The words stole her breath. She didn't know if he meant them as threat or promise, but it didn't matter. Both were the same. He stepped back. "Leave." She hesitated. "My lord." "Go." The word cracked like a whip. She obeyed, but as she reached the door, she heard his voice again, softer, almost human. "Bellatrix." She froze. He didn't look at her when he said it. "You are right. I see you. Her heart stopped, then raced so violently she thought it might shatter. When she finally left, the corridors seemed to blur. Every step echoed in her bones. His words chased her down the hall, through the dark, into her very dreams. He saw her, and for Bellatrix Lestrange, that was enough to burn the world. The rain did not stop for 3 days. It beat against the high windows of Malfoy Manor like the impatient hands of the dead, echoing through the corridors where she walked alone. Bellatrix moved silently, her mind repeating his words. You are right. I see you. Those 5 words had changed everything. They were not affection, not confession, but acknowledgement. And for her, that was enough. She no longer needed sleep. When she closed her eyes, she saw him anyway. When she opened them, she searched for him in every shadow. The others noticed her restlessness. Lucius avoided her gaze. Even Rodolphus had stopped speaking. But she didn't care. She had something they didn't: his attention. And then, on the 4th night, her mark burned. She was on her feet before she realized she'd moved, the firelight of her room still flickering behind her as she disapparated. The air where she landed was sharp with cold. A deserted chapel stood before her, its roof half collapsed, its windows long gone. Inside, a single torch burned, and there he was, her lord, her center, her undoing. My lord, she whispered, kneeling at once. Rise, Bellatrix, he said. His voice was softer tonight, low and almost thoughtful. She rose slowly, her breath trembling. You called. I did. He turned toward her, and she saw that he was holding something. An ancient book, its cover bound in scales that shimmered faintly like snakeskin. Do you know what this is? Her eyes flicked to the book, then back to him. A relic. A record, he corrected. Written by those who came before me. Their ambition was great, but their loyalty... His mouth curled faintly. Fragile. Bellatrix took a cautious step forward. Then you called me, because mine is not. He glanced up at her, his eyes crimson in the torchlight. You learn quickly. She stopped just short of him, the distance between them pulsing like a heartbeat. Tell me what you need of me. He regarded her in silence, and for a moment she wondered if he would dismiss her. But then he said, I require a vessel. The words stirred something inside her. A vessel? For what comes next, he said. There are forms of magic that demand more than power. They demand will, a soul unflinching. Mine, she said instantly. You can have mine. He gave a low, quiet laugh that was not amusement. You offer what I already own. Her breath caught. Then tell me how to prove it. He turned away, his cloak whispering across the floor. Come here. She obeyed, always. When she reached him, he held out the book. Read, he commanded. Her eyes skimmed the ancient script. The words were written in a language older than English, but somehow she understood them. They spoke of devotion, of a magic that bound power through affection, through trust, through surrender. You see why it failed, he said. They mistook feeling for strength. Bellatrix raised her eyes to his. Feeling is strength. He smiled then, barely, cruelly. And yet it is what destroyed them. She shook her head. They were weak. I am not. You speak as though you would dare what they could not. I would, she said, if it's your will. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the faint pulse of the vein in his temple, the stillness of a man who had forgotten what it was to breathe. There are no limits to your loyalty, are there?" "No," she said simply. His voice dropped to a whisper. "And what if loyalty required you to lose yourself entirely? Then I would be lost in you." The answer came too fast, too real. He studied her, and she felt his gaze like fire against her skin. "You are a dangerous creature, Bellatrix." "For you," she breathed. "Perhaps for more than that." The words should have chilled her, but they didn't. They filled her with something like light, strange and painful and beautiful. He closed the book and set it aside. "Kneel." She obeyed instantly, the stone floor cold beneath her knees. He extended his wand, the tip glowing faintly. "You wish to serve me as no one ever has? Then listen. There is a spell that binds two sources of magic. It requires trust. It requires surrender. Do you trust me, Bellatrix?" "Completely." He raised his wand, and the air between them vibrated. The light grew, twisting, forming a thin thread of magic that shimmered like molten gold. "Hold out your hand." She did. The light touched her skin, and agony flooded through her. She bit back a cry, her nails digging into her palm. The thread burned into her flesh, leaving behind a faint, dark mark that pulsed in time with her heart. When it was done, she was trembling. Voldemort lowered his wand. "It is done." "What did you do to me?" she whispered, her voice raw. "I gave you what you asked for." Her eyes widened. "What? What does it mean?" He regarded her quietly. "It means our magic is bound. When I call, you will come. When I suffer, you will feel it." A shiver ran through her. "Then I am yours in truth." "You always were." He turned away then, but she could see the faintest flicker of something in his movements. Hesitation, perhaps. She rose slowly, her legs unsteady, and whispered, "Why me?" He didn't answer. She took a step closer. "You could have chosen anyone. Why me?" Finally, he looked at her. "Because you are the only one who would not hesitate to burn." For a long moment, neither moved. Then, without another word, he disapparated, leaving only silence and the faint scent of smoke. When Bellatrix returned to the manor, her entire body felt alive. The mark on her hand pulsed faintly, responding to some unseen rhythm. She could feel him, not his thoughts, but his presence, distant yet constant, like a heartbeat echoing in the dark. She didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window, tracing the mark with her finger, the storm outside raging against the glass. Every flash of lightning illuminated her face, pale and fevered, her eyes bright with something close to joy. He had bound her to him, not by force, not by command, but by choice. And though the bond burned, though it hurt in ways she couldn't describe, she cherished it, because pain meant connection, and connection meant belonging. For the first time in her life, she felt whole. The next day, the others noticed. They whispered about the strange gleam in her eyes, about the way her magic crackled in the air around her. Even Lucius dared not speak her name. She had become something else, something not quite human, not quite mortal. And somewhere far away, she knew he felt it too. Every time he drew his wand, her pulse quickened. When he grew angry, her chest ached. When he used his power, she felt it course through her veins like fire. Their bond was madness, and yet it was everything she had ever wanted. She belonged to him entirely. And though she knew the day would come when that bond would destroy her, she also knew this. When it did, he would feel it. And in that single instant, he would remember what it was to love. The days that followed blurred into one long pulse of connection. Bellatrix no longer lived only in her own body. She lived in his. The bond, whatever strange magic he had woven between them, burned softly under her skin like an invisible brand. Sometimes it ached, sometimes it sang. She could not tell when the pain ended and the pleasure began. When he was angry, she felt it first, a pressure behind her ribs, sharp and cold. When he was calm, the air around her seemed to still. She began to measure her days, not by sunrise and sunset, but by the rhythm of his moods. The other Death Eaters feared her more than ever. They whispered that she had been touched by the Dark Lord himself, that she no longer slept, that her laughter had turned strange and hollow. They were right. Sleep was useless now. Her dreams were filled with him. Sometimes she saw only his eyes, sometimes his hand reaching toward her through the dark. Always, when she woke, her mark burned faintly in answer. One evening, while she was sitting before the hearth, a sharp pain struck her chest, sudden, violent, gone in an instant. It was not hers. It was his. She rose at once, breathless. Somewhere, far away, he was fighting. She could feel the flare of his magic like lightning under her skin. The connection pulled at her, a command without words. She apparated before she could think, landing in a clearing choked with smoke. Bodies lay scattered in the wet grass, Aurors and Death Eaters alike. At the center of it, all stood the Dark Lord, wand raised, his power still humming through the air. His robe was torn at the shoulder. Blood, bright and startling, streaked the pale fabric. He turned when she appeared. "Bellatrix," he said quietly, "you should not be here." She fell to her knees before him. "You were hurt." "It is nothing. It is mine," she said fiercely. "I felt it." He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "The bond was never meant for you to follow. I follow because I must." His voice sharpened. "You forget yourself. I forget everything but you." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of smoke and blood. Around them, the battlefield stilled, the survivors crawling away into the night. For a moment, there was only the sound of rain beginning to fall. He looked down at her, so small against the wreckage, and something flickered in his eyes. "You are bound to me, Bellatrix," he said. "Not my equal, not my shadow, my servant." Her lips curved. "Then command me." He hesitated, and she saw it. The briefest crack in his control, the spark of emotion he tried to deny. "You would do anything I ask." "Yes." He stepped closer. "Even if I asked you to forget me." Her breath caught. "That you cannot ask." "Then you are already lost." He turned away, but she rose, trembling, and caught his sleeve. The motion was reckless, impossible, but she did it anyway. "If I am lost," she whispered, "then I am where I belong." His gaze fell to her hand, clutching the dark fabric. For a heartbeat, he did not move. Then, quietly, "Let go." She obeyed, her fingers slipping free. The rain was falling harder now, blurring the world around them into shadow and silver. He regarded her through it, and his voice softened, almost imperceptibly. "You will destroy yourself, Bellatrix." "Then let me," she murmured, "so long as it's for you." He said nothing, but when he disapparated, leaving her alone in the rain, she felt the faint echo of his magic wrap around her, like a touch that wasn't quite there. That night, she returned to the manor soaked and shivering, but alive with something fierce and bright. The bond throbbed in her hand, stronger than before. She could still sense him, distant but present, a steady hum beneath her skin. She pressed her palm against her heart and smiled. In the weeks that followed, she became his shadow in truth. He did not summon her often, but when he did, she was there before he spoke the words. Sometimes he used her ruthlessly, sending her to deliver messages, to extract information, to kill. She obeyed without hesitation. Yet beneath every order, every punishment, there was the silent thread that tied them together. Once, during a raid, she felt the bond flare again, not from pain, but from something else, something raw and wordless. He was pleased, proud. The sensation struck her harder than any spell. She fought twice as fiercely after that, the echo of his satisfaction driving her forward. Afterward, when the others celebrated in the manor's hall, he summoned her alone. "You fought well," he said. "I fought for you." He looked at her, and she saw a faint, reluctant curiosity in his gaze. "Why do you persist in this delusion, Bellatrix?" "What delusion?" "That what you feel has meaning." "It has power," she said. "That is meaning enough." He turned away, pacing slowly. "Power fades. Devotion fades. You will fade. Then I will burn first." Her words made him stop. When he turned back, his eyes were unreadable. "You cannot frighten me with sacrifice." "I'm not trying to frighten you," she said softly. "I'm trying to reach you." Something in him went still. The silence stretched until she thought he might curse her for her boldness. But instead, he spoke so quietly, she almost didn't hear. "There is nothing left in me to reach." She took a step closer. "Then let me be what remains." He closed his eyes briefly, as if the sound of her voice cost him something. "You mistake persistence for love. And you mistake fear for strength." The words hung between them, sharp and unrepentant. Then, slowly, he lifted his wand and traced it through the air. A faint shimmer appeared, a wall of invisible force pushing her gently backward. "Go," he said. She hesitated. "If I go, will you still feel me?" He did not answer, but she felt the pull at her palm, a brief surge of magic that told her everything. "Yes," she whispered. "You will." Then she turned and left him, the echo of his presence trailing behind her like a second heartbeat. Later, alone in her chamber, she stood before the mirror again. The mark on her hand glowed faintly, darker now, as though it fed on her pulse. She touched it and felt him, distant but real. He would never admit it, never say the words, but the bond between them lived, breathing and dangerous. She had become part of his power, the unspoken secret he could neither destroy nor name. And Bellatrix knew, with a certainty that frightened even her, that when the final battle came, she would not fight for victory. She would fight for the moment his eyes met hers, just once more, long enough for him to remember that once, long ago, he had seen her. That would be enough. That would be everything. The bond had become her heartbeat. Bellatrix no longer questioned when it would flare or fade. She simply lived by it. It guided her every motion, every breath, every battle. The others didn't understand why her eyes gleamed when his anger spread through the room, or why she smiled when his fury cracked the air. They thought she was mad. Perhaps she was. But madness was the only language left between them. The night he summoned her again, the air in the manor seemed to hold its breath. She felt the pull before her. Mark even burned. His call was quieter this time, almost uncertain. She followed it instantly, disapparating to the place where she knew he waited. An abandoned library, its walls half swallowed by ivy. Dust hung in the air, thick as fog, and the scent of parchment and age filled her lungs. He stood at the far end of the room, a pale figure among the ruins. The fire from the single candle flickered across his face, painting it in golden shadow. "My lord," she breathed, sinking to her knees. He turned, voice low. "You came quickly. I always do. Do you know why? Because you willed it." He studied her, and for a long moment there was only the crackle of the candle. "No," he said softly, "because you cannot help yourself." Bellatrix's lips curved. "Nor can you, it seems." That earned her a flicker of something across his expression, amusement or perhaps irritation. "You think I am bound by the same weakness that governs you." "I think," she said, rising slowly, "that even power grows lonely." The silence that followed was a kind of tension, a thread pulled too tight. He moved closer, his footsteps whispering across the floor. "You would presume to know me." "I don't need to presume. I feel you." She lifted her marked hand, the faint shimmer of the bond glinting in the firelight. "Here, always." He regarded the mark with an unreadable gaze. "You feel the echo of my will, nothing more. The bond was never meant to give you understanding. And yet it does." Her voice trembled, but she didn't look away. "When you are angry, my heart burns. When you are calm, I can breathe again. You cannot deny it." He stepped so close that the air between them shivered. "You mistake reflection for intimacy. I allow you to feel what I choose." "Then why choose this?" she whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, he lifted his hand, slowly, deliberately, and touched the mark on hers. The contact sent a jolt through her entire body, light and agony twined together. Her breath caught, "My lord." "Do you feel that?" he murmured. "Yes. That is pain." "It's you," she gasped. "It's all I want." The corner of his mouth twitched. "Then you are beyond saving." Was I ever meant to be saved? He withdrew his hand. "No." She should have been crushed by the word, but instead she felt something close to peace. Her devotion was no longer a question. It was fact, carved into her bones. He turned away from her, his cloak whispering across the floor. "There is a mission," he said. "One that will test more than your loyalty. There is a prophecy, one that speaks of a child, one who may threaten me. You will find those who hide him." Bellatrix straightened. "I will find them." "You must be careful. They are protected by Dumbledore's spies." Her eyes gleamed. "Let them try to stop me." He looked back at her then, his gaze unreadable. "Do not let your hunger for my approval blind you." "My hunger is my strength," she said. He gave a quiet sigh, so soft she almost didn't hear it. "And one day, it will be your death." "If it is," she said, smiling faintly, "it will be your hand that delivers it." He said nothing, but as she turned to leave, she felt it, a surge in the bond, like a heartbeat answering her own. He didn't stop her. He didn't need to. The silence between them said enough. It took her 3 days to find the right trail. Each night, she felt his presence, sometimes distant, sometimes pressing so close she could almost hear his breath. The bond guided her like a compass. It was madness to rely on it, and yet it had never led her astray. When at last she found the hiding place, a cottage cloaked in wards and spells, she felt the surge of his awareness through her. He knew. He was watching. The fight was short, brutal. When it was done, the cottage burned. The mark on her hand pulsed once, faintly, as if in acknowledgement. She returned to him the next night, blood still staining her robes. He stood in the manor's grand hall, the light from the fire reflecting in his eyes. He didn't look at her immediately. He didn't need to. "It is done," he said quietly. "Yes, my lord." He turned then. "You killed them." "Yes. And yet you returned to me empty-handed." She hesitated. The prophecy was gone. He regarded her for a long moment. "Gone?" "Someone took it before I arrived." "Who?" "I do not know." He moved closer. "Then you have failed me." The words struck like a curse. "No, my lord, please, I—" Silence. The air thickened. Magic flared around him, cold and merciless. She dropped to her knees, trembling under the weight of his fury. "Do you know what failure means, Bellatrix?" "Yes," she whispered. "Then why do I spare you?" "Because you cannot," she said, the words escaping before she could stop them. He froze. She dared to lift her gaze. "Because we are bound. Because you would feel my death as your own." For a long time he said nothing. Then slowly the magic ebbed. He stepped closer until his shadow swallowed her completely. "You presume too much." "Do I?" He reached out, touching her chin, forcing her to look up. "You mistake your leash for power." "And you mistake your control for freedom," she whispered. His fingers tightened just enough to make her gasp. Then, abruptly, he released her. "Go, before I change my mind." She rose, her limbs trembling. But as she turned to leave, she heard it again, that faint pulse of the bond, answering her fear. He felt it too. And for the first time, she saw something flicker behind his eyes. Not anger, not pity, but a shadow of something that might have been sorrow. Later, alone, Bellatrix traced the mark on her hand. The skin there glowed faintly, the same color as candlelight. He had tried to hurt her, to break her, and yet the bond held. It would always hold. She pressed her palm to her heart and smiled through the ache. He thought himself untouchable, beyond all feeling. But she knew better. She had seen it in that single flicker, in the hesitation that betrayed him. He was afraid, not of her, but of what she made him remember. And that fear, that single human crack in his perfect armor, was her victory, because one day she would make him feel it again. The manor slept under the weight of storm clouds. Lightning flashed across the tall windows, and thunder rolled like a heartbeat buried deep within the earth. Bellatrix stood alone in the great hall, her wand light trembling against the marble floor. She should have gone to rest hours ago, but the bond pulsed beneath her skin, restless, alive. It told her he was near. When the door opened, she didn't turn. She didn't need to. His presence filled the room before he spoke. "My lord." "Bellatrix." His voice was quieter than usual, stripped of its familiar edge. She turned. He looked the same, immortal, untouchable, but something was wrong. There was a flicker of weariness around his eyes, a shadow that had not been there before. She felt it through the bond, a strain, a quiet ache echoing through her veins. "You're hurt," she said. "It is nothing." She took a step closer. "I can feel it." He regarded her with that still, dangerous calm. "You feel too much. That is your curse." "Then let me bear it," she whispered. "Let me take what you cannot show." His gaze sharpened. "You think I hide pain? I think you deny it." He moved toward her slowly, every step deliberate. "You would carry it for me?" "Yes. Even if it breaks you. It already has." A strange silence fell between them, heavy and electric. The rain beat harder against the windows. He stopped only inches away from her, his breath a ghost against her cheek. "You are not meant to understand me, Bellatrix." "And yet I do," she murmured. "You crave control because once, long ago, you lost it. You fear love because you remember what it cost you. His eyes flashed red in the darkness. Enough. But she didn't stop. You remember what it was to feel. You remember the pain, and you call it weakness, but you can't kill what's already part of you. He raised his wand so suddenly that her heart leapt. The air thickened, crackling with power. She stood still, her eyes locked on his. "Do it," she whispered. "If I'm wrong, end it." The tip of his wand glowed. For a moment, she thought he would. Then, abruptly, the light dimmed. He turned away. "You are impossible," he said quietly. "And yet, I cannot rid myself of you." Her knees nearly gave way. "Then you admit—" "I admit nothing." But she heard what he didn't say. She saw it in the way his shoulders tensed, in the faint tremor of his hand. The bond between them hummed, a steady pulse that neither could silence. "Why do you keep me?" she asked. "Because you are loyal." "That's not the reason." He turned back to her. "No," he said after a pause. "It isn't." He stepped closer again, and the distance between them disappeared. His eyes held hers, unblinking, relentless. "Tell me, Bellatrix, when you dream, what do you see?" "You," she said without hesitation. "Always you. And when you wake, I wait for you." His expression was unreadable. "Do you hate yourself for it?" "No." "Then you are more lost than I thought." "Or more found," she said softly, "because I know what I was made for." The storm outside howled, wind rattling the windows. His voice dropped lower. "And what is that?" "To love you," she said. "To remind you what you swore to forget." His hand moved before thought could stop it, catching her chin, tilting her face upward. His touch was cold, but beneath it she could feel the faint tremor of life. She knew he would deny it, yet the proof was there, beating under his skin. "You think love will redeem me?" he asked. "No. I think it will destroy us both." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, quietly, he released her. "You should be afraid." "I am," she said, smiling through it. "But I've never wanted anything more." He turned away, his back to her. "There is a mission tomorrow. You will lead it. Take who you wish." "Yes, my lord." "And if you fail again?" "I won't." He nodded once, dismissing her, but as she moved toward the door, he spoke again, almost to himself. "There was a time," he said, "when I thought love could be bent to serve ambition. It cannot. It consumes. You, of all people, should know that." "I do," she said softly, "and I still choose it." He didn't answer. She left him standing by the window, the stormlight turning him to silver and shadow. The next night, she led the attack. The rain hadn't stopped. It followed her to the field where Dumbledore's allies waited, their wands already raised. She fought like fire, laughing as spells cut through the dark. Every curse, every scream fed the hunger that had taken root inside her. She felt him with her, distant but watching. The bond sang in her veins, pushing her forward. When it was over, she stood in the ruins of battle, her body trembling, her breath ragged. The survivors fled into the night. She could still taste the metallic tang of blood on the wind. Then came the pain, sharp, sudden through the bond, a flare of rage that was not hers. He was calling, angry, summoning. She disapparated at once. He was waiting in the same hall where the storm had first brought them together. His expression was cold, distant. "You disobeyed orders." "I succeeded." "At what cost?" She hesitated. "3 of ours are dead." His gaze hardened. "You call that success?" "They died for you." They died for nothing. The words struck her harder than any curse. You cannot mean that. I mean everything I say. Her throat tightened. Then why keep me alive? He looked at her for a long time. Because you remind me of something I hate. What? The past. She stepped closer. Then let me erase it. You cannot. I can try. The silence between them was unbearable. Finally, he turned his back to her. Go. She didn't move. One day, she said quietly, you will understand why I love you. And when that day comes, I will be gone, she said, but you will remember. He did not look at her again, but through the bond she felt the faint tremor of emotion, unspoken, unwanted, undeniable. When she left, the storm broke open above the manor, lightning spilling across the sky. Bellatrix walked into the rain, her head tilted back, her smile soft and wild. He could call it weakness, call it madness, call it anything he wished. But she had seen the truth tonight, hidden in his silence. He could destroy her, he could erase her, but he could never forget her. And that, she thought, was victory enough. The dawn after the storm rose grey and brittle. The manor's corridors were quiet, emptied by fatigue and loss. Bellatrix moved through them like a ghost, her boots clicking softly against the stone. Every step echoed with fragments of last night's words. You remind me of something I hate. She had expected that. She had even wanted it. But the look in his eyes when he said it, too calm, too deliberate, had shaken her more than any curse could. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, the bond stirred, whispering faintly at the edge of her thoughts. She felt him everywhere, the slow rhythm of his breathing, the faint pulse of his magic as it moved through the manor, the ache he would never admit. It tethered her to him more completely than chains ever could. By midday, she could no longer stay away. She found him in the library, standing before the same black marble fireplace where they had argued countless times. His back was turned. The air smelled of ash and rain. My lord, you disobeyed my command to rest, he said without turning. I couldn't. You disobey many things. I obey the only thing that matters. He faced her then, his eyes a clear, impossible red. And what is that? You, she said simply. The faintest sigh escaped him, neither anger nor surprise. If devotion were power, you would rule the world. I would give it back to you, she answered. He stepped closer, studying her as though he could read the shape of her madness. Why do you persist in believing that this fixation can touch me? Because it already has. The words were a spark in dry air. He stopped moving, his expression unreadable. Explain. The bond, she whispered. You feel it, the way I do. You know when I bleed. You know when I breathe. You could have broken it, but you didn't. That means something. He looked away, his voice barely above a whisper. It means that I am careless. No, she said softly. It means that somewhere, even you can't bear the silence. A flash of anger, or perhaps fear, crossed his face. You speak of what you cannot understand. Then teach me, she said. Let me see what you see. He turned sharply, the air snapping around them. Enough! The command struck like thunder. Yet even as the echo faded, she saw his hand tremble before he hid it in the folds of his robe. You are trembling, she said. He froze. You imagine it. She stepped closer, slow and fearless. No, you feel it too. The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, he said, Do you know what you truly are to me? Yes, she whispered. Proof. His eyes narrowed. Of what? that you still have a heart." The fire hissed. For a moment she thought he would strike her. She even wanted him to. But instead, he turned his face toward the flames. "You play with death, Bellatrix." "I belong to it," she said. "To you." He looked back at her, and for once there was no cruelty in his gaze, only something quieter, something that frightened her more than any curse. "If I asked you to vanish, to forget me entirely, would you?" She shook her head. "I can't. The bond wouldn't let me." "Then I am your prison," he said. "And my freedom," she whispered. He exhaled slowly, and the faintest trace of warmth passed through the bond, a flicker of feeling so brief it could have been imagined. "You have a strange gift for turning ruin into devotion. That's what love is." "No," he said. "Love is surrender." "Then let me surrender." He turned away again. "You already have." That night, he summoned the inner circle. Plans were made. New wars whispered into being. Bellatrix stood beside him, silent, watching the faces of men who called him master, but would never truly understand him. When he spoke, his voice was measured, calm, almost beautiful. Every word was a promise of fear, yet to her it sounded like music. When the meeting ended, the others bowed and withdrew. She lingered. He did not tell her to leave. Instead, he asked without looking at her, "Why do you stay?" "To remember." "Remember what?" "That once you spoke to me as if I mattered." He was silent for a long time. Then softly, "You still do." The words landed like a blow. She stared at him, unable to breathe. He turned at last, and for a heartbeat the world narrowed to the space between them. "Do not mistake that for affection," he said. "I don't," she whispered. "I take it for truth." He stepped closer until the edge of his cloak brushed her knees. "You are playing a dangerous game." "I already lost," she said. "Now I only play to stay near the fire." "Fire burns." "I know." "Then why stay?" "Because I was cold before you." He closed his eyes briefly as if the words pained him. When he opened them again, the mask was back in place. "There will come a day," he said, "when you wish you had never met me." "That day will never come." He studied her, the faintest crease forming between his brows. "You believe that, and belief can move worlds, but it cannot change what I am." "I don't want to change you," she said. "Only to be what you remember." Something flickered behind his eyes. Weariness, perhaps. "Go." She obeyed, but as she reached the doorway, he spoke again. "Bellatrix." She turned. "Do not die before the end," he said. "I would feel it." Her throat tightened. "Then I will live. For me, for as long as you let me." He said nothing more, but when she closed the door behind her, the bond flared, steady and bright, pulsing in rhythm with her heart. It felt almost like a heartbeat, not her own. Later that night, she stood by her window, watching the storm drift toward the horizon. The bond was quiet now, settled into something steady and undeniable. She could still feel him, a constant presence, neither near nor far, like gravity itself. She traced the mark on her hand, remembering his words. "You still matter." They echoed inside her, fragile and dangerous. It was not love, not in any human sense. It was recognition, the closest thing he could give. And that, to Bellatrix, was everything. Somewhere deep in the manor, she knew he was awake, pacing, pretending that the world was his alone. But every few breaths, she felt it, the faint echo of her heartbeat mirrored by his. He would never admit it. He would never speak of it. Yet the truth lived between them, silent and eternal. He saw her. He felt her, and no spell in existence could unmake that. She closed her eyes and smiled. Tomorrow would bring new orders, new wars, new deaths. But tonight, she had this, the proof that even the darkest soul could not exist without the faint pulse of another's. The bond throbbed once, softly, as if in answer. Bellatrix whispered into the quiet, "Always." And the word shimmered through the magic between them, like a vow neither of them had ever meant to make. The war thickened around them like fog. The ministry had fallen. The world bent beneath his will. And still, Bellatrix felt that she lived only in the spaces where he looked at her. The Dark Lord was everywhere, his image, his voice, his fear. But she alone felt his pulse in her veins. The bond was both a blessing and a curse, a living current that tied her to his strength and to his silence alike. She no longer counted the days. She counted moments when she felt him near. Every time his anger flashed across the country, it burned through her chest like lightning. Every quiet evening, when he withdrew to study or plot, she would sense the faint hum of his magic, the rhythm of thought, the weight of control. She could almost hear his mind moving. That night, she found him in the drawing room. He was standing by the fire, as he often did, reading letters from his followers. The room glowed gold and red, the air thick with the scent of smoke. She entered without a sound. "My lord," she said softly. He didn't look up. "The hour is late. I couldn't sleep. You rarely do." He set the letters aside and turned toward her. "Why are you here?" "Because I felt you call." "I did not." "You don't need to." A faint shadow crossed his face. "The bond is not an invitation. It's a connection," she said. "A truth. You can pretend to ignore it, but you feel it too." His gaze sharpened, the air trembling between them. "You would accuse me of sentiment? I would accuse you of being alive." The words hung between them, reckless and daring. He moved closer, each step slow and deliberate. "Alive?" he repeated. "Yes." He stopped only inches away. "You think you know what that means?" Her voice trembled. "It means you can still choose." His eyes burned red in the firelight. "Choice is a luxury of the weak." "Then why not kill me?" she said quietly. "You've had 1,000 chances." He said nothing. "You could break the bond, end me, but you haven't. You overestimate your importance. Then prove me wrong." He raised his wand so swiftly the air cracked. The tip glowed green. Bellatrix stood still, her heart hammering, her lips parting in a breathless, defiant smile. "Do it," she whispered, "if I mean nothing." He didn't. The spell faltered before it left his wand. His hand dropped, fingers tightening until the knuckles whitened. "You tempt death too easily. It's the only thing that brings me closer to you." He turned away sharply, pacing once before speaking. "You think you understand what binds us. You don't. This connection, it was meant to control you, to make you useful. It was never meant to feel. And yet it does." He faced her again, his voice low. "You mistake the echo for the source. What you feel is my magic, not my heart." Her lips curved. "Then your magic is mercifully human." His eyes flashed. "You forget who stands before you." "No," she said, stepping closer. "I remember every second." He stood very still as she reached out, her hand trembling, and brushed her fingers against the sleeve of his robe. The faintest spark leapt between them. The bond stirred. Alive, undeniable. "See," she whispered, "even silence speaks between us." For the first time in months, He didn't pull away. He didn't speak. The fire popped softly, casting shadows that flickered over his face. In that fragile moment, she saw something she had never dared to imagine: hesitation. Then, quietly, he said, "You would destroy me if you could." "No," she said. "I would make you remember what you buried." He turned from her. "You think I want that?" "I think part of you already does." The silence stretched, taut as a curse. He looked back at her once more, his voice barely a whisper. "Leave, before I make you wish you had never spoken." She didn't move. "If I leave, will you stop feeling this?" He hesitated. "That's what I thought," she said softly, and disapparated before he could answer. She reappeared in her chambers, breathless, trembling. The bond flared under her skin like a brand. She could feel him, his fury, his restraint, his silence. He wanted her gone. He wanted her near. The contradiction tore through them both. For the first time, she wondered what he saw when he looked at her. Not a follower. He had many. Not a servant. He had hundreds. But her, a mirror, perhaps, a reflection of something he despised because it was once his own. She couldn't rest. She paced until dawn, her steps echoing against the walls. When at last the first grey light crept across the floor, the bond pulsed once, faintly. He was awake. He was thinking of her. That was enough. Days passed in uneasy silence. The war raged on, but inside the manor everything felt suspended, waiting. Orders were given through intermediaries. Messages came and went, but she didn't see him. She told herself she didn't need to. The bond still hummed quietly, steady as breath. That was proof enough that he hadn't broken it. One night, as she prepared for another mission, the pain hit her. Sharp, sudden, deep. It was not hers. Her knees buckled, her vision blurred. Through the bond, she felt it. His rage, his exhaustion, the strain of battle. He was fighting, and losing ground. Without thought, she disapparated. The world snapped into chaos. Spells tore through the air, screams echoing across a burning field. In the center of it, all stood the Dark Lord, his magic blazing, his robes torn by wind and fire. She ran toward him, deflecting curses, her voice breaking through the noise. "My lord!" He turned, surprise flashing in his eyes. "You shouldn't be here. You called me." "I did not." "You did," she gasped, blocking a curse. "Through this." She held up her hand, the mark between them blazing with light. He froze for an instant, then turned his fury on their enemies. Together, they moved as one. His power, her fury. The bond pulsed like a living thing, magic twisting between them, feeding on their breath, their blood, their defiance. When the battle ended, the field was silent. Smoke drifted across the ground. She was shaking, not from fear, but from the raw weight of what she felt through him. He was alive, barely. She could sense the strain in every heartbeat. "My lord," she whispered, reaching for him. "You're hurt." He looked at her, expression unreadable. "You came. I always will, even when I forbid it, especially then." He regarded her for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was quiet, almost gentle. "One day, Bellatrix, this will kill you." "Then you will feel it," she said, "and know that I was yours until the end." Something flickered in his eyes, something neither of them named. He turned away, but she saw his hand tremble before he hid it again in his sleeve. They said nothing more. Yet as they left the burning field behind, the bond between them pulsed steady and bright. It was no longer just magic. It was memory, promise, punishment, all in one. And though the war was far from over, Bellatrix knew the truth that would haunt them both until the last spell fell. He could master death, but not her devotion. And somewhere, buried deep beneath the ashes of his soul, he knew it too.
I had many thoughts about passion that can burn even in the cold, and about a bond that is sometimes stronger than magic itself. Bellatrix found her eternal peace in a complete devotion, in accepting her fate without doubt. I hope the atmosphere of this deep, dark feeling helps you let go of reality as well. Let the night take away all your worries, just as rain washes away the traces of past battles. Breathe slowly. Silence is already near.